Good morning, gentlemen. I'm going to have a small talk with you today on Ukraine. Ukraine, as you know, is very much in the news because one of the hot spots in the world, and nobody really knows what's going to happen in future. But we have to be very careful that it doesn't lead to a conflagration and destruction of the world. If you look at the history of the past century, you will see that Europe was the epicenter of two world wars. The First World War, which was started off by the Central Powers, helped by the Ottoman Empire, and then the World War II, which was again started by Hitler and Mussolini against the Allies. So the epicenter of two world wars has been Europe, and there's a good chance that World War III again could very well be part of Europe. Now the situation is a little complex, and basically because Vladimir Putin has miscalculated the entire thing very badly. He assumed that his columns of tanks would move into Ukraine, and even honestly I thought so, and there would be victory, Kyiv would be captured, there would be a regime change, and Ukraine will not become a member of NATO. And the existentialist threat to Russia would be obviated. It has happened that way. Because Putin did not calculate, I'll tell you why. In 1992, Yeltsin had offered to join NATO. It was Bill Clinton and the American think who said, no, we don't want you to be in NATO, because Americans had a plan wherein they would treat Russia as an enemy to create a fear psychosis in the European states so that American hegemony could continue for the next 100 years. And the overall aim was to destroy Russia as a world power. So despite the assurance to Yeltsin that the Americans would not expand NATO to the old Warsaw Pact countries, the Americans did precisely that. And the last straw which broke the camel's back was Ukraine, because Ukraine was to become a member of NATO and a frontline state against Russia. It was an existentialist threat to the Russian state, and Putin had to take action, and he did. He launched an invasion. But he did not calculate all the pros and cons. And he should have calculated that the Americans would react. And once they reacted, they would beef up Ukraine. Because the aim of the Americans is to finish off Russia. And they would not have allowed Russia to win in Ukraine. If Putin had thought on those lines, he would have started the campaign in a different way. And that's just talked about a limited military engagement, which he did. Which is a foolish thing to do. But that's what happened. Now he has woken up, he has started using all sorts of weapons, missiles, rockets, this thing, that thing, but the battle is not won. Because what is happening now is something very unique. The Russians are now at the end of their tether. They don't know what to do. What are we going to do? They are not winning. And main thing, as I told you, is the infantry soldier has to hold the ground, and the Russians not having the infantry. The conscripts, who are the soldiers drafted into the Russian military, are not having the stomach for a fight. They don't want to fight. And many are asking, why the hell are you fighting in Ukraine? The Ukrainians are destroyed, but then they have willpower, and they have a leader in Zelensky who's goading them on. He's being backed by America. So when you have the world's most powerful country, the world's most richest country, backing up Ukraine, what results can you expect? Putin never calculated all that, and when he woke up, it was too late. You know, it's like Humpty Dumpty had sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty together again, and that's precisely what happened in Ukraine. Now Putin's prestige is at stake. If the Russians have a ceasefire and say hands up or give up or vacate the Donbass region for Ukraine, it means the perpetual loss of Russia as a superpower status. nobody will take Russia seriously. And Putin has spoiled his own copybook by all the time threatening nuclear war. He's been having on nuclear drills. He thought bluff and bluster will work. It doesn't work that way. And the net result is Russia has not used the nuclear option and they're not going to use it either, because were they to use it, they would become the moral leper all over the world and nobody will respect Russia. Putin has to avoid that, and he's not going to use nuclear weapons. I don't think he's going to use it. Then why should he have gone and made all those threats? So now he's at the end of his tether. The Russians have made some gains, I'm told, in Kherson region, but this is minimal. It's got no meaning, considering that the country as big as Ukraine was occupied by the Indian army, that is East Pakistan, inside 14 days. And here they are hanging out for 9 months. They just captured 15-20% of the territory, suffering huge amount of casualties. And you must remember that Russia has a population only of 145 billion and is not an unlimited manpower like China and India. So Russia is in serious problem, I think. Russian economy is tanked up. And the question arises, there are dissenting voices in Russia and people are wondering, what are we going to do next? All along they have been fed on the fact that Russia is the greatest power in the world and the net result is a big zero. The Russians have not even been able to beat the Ukrainians, and that is a very, very harsh fact which the Russian people are not going to understand. Russia is still a closed society, and I'm not very certain what's going to happen next. Where is the chance that Putin may not be overthrown? Same thing could happen to Zelensky. But he's got the backing of America. Well, the Russians are supposed to have the backing of China, but China is not the nation which can back Russia totally, because there's so much of problem it has got on its own. It's got an insurrection in Xinjiang, unrest in Tibet, all over, and then they're facing Formosa, Taiwan, and there's a big American presence in South Korea. Japan is anti-China. India is either not a friend of China, and so I don't think the Russians can rely on the Chinese, and Putin better realize it. So all his talk of going and sitting with President Xi and smiling and holding hands together that we are allies, well, if they were such an ally, the Chinese would have gone on the side of the Russians in Ukraine. They haven't done it. So the reality is Russia is single and alone. And the Americans have been able to gang up the entire world against them. And Putin is on the verge of a serious default in world history. I do not know what's going to happen next, but the only way option is for Putin now to use a limited nuclear strike. I don't see any other option for me. He's been pushed to the corner by the Americans, and probably he'll risk the fact that Russia is going to be ostracize the world. He's going to risk it, and that could well mean World War III. Americans have a plan. Frankly, I'm not aware about it, but obviously they are not going to use their nuclear weapons on Russia. That is effect. But that doesn't mean they are not going to act other way. They're going to gang up the entire world against Russia. Because this is something no nation in the world, in India, will accept, that you use a nuclear weapon in Ukraine. But then I see no other option for Putin other than negotiating a ceasefire and retreat. Will he do it? I don't think so. And that is the clue to the entire issue. We'll have to see what happens, gentlemen. The war is an interesting stage. And the die has now, or rather I would say the ball is in the court of Putin. He has to decide. And the Americans have left him with no option at all. Either he wins or he retreats. There is no intermediate region, because as you can see, he'd asked for a 36-hour ceasefire during Christmas. Ukraine didn't respond. So if they didn't respond to a ceasefire for 36 hours, how are they going to have a ceasefire at all? Because so long as the Ukrainians are confident of American help. So the clue to ending this war lies with Biden. And he'll have to decide whether he's going to take the risk of a destruction, a thermonuclear war, and the destruction of American society and the American civilization. Gentlemen, everything is possible on the table. What looks improbable now becomes possible. And people should be sure that nothing is going to happen in Russia or in the United States or Ukraine. The stakes are very high, and I hope sanity will prevail and we don't have another war on our hands, the Third World War, but that will effectively mean the end of European civilization. I close now, gentlemen. Jai Hind, and God bless. Look after yourself. Share your channel, your opinions with your friends, and subscribe. Goodbye.